All right, guys, welcome to a new episode. What we're gonna be working on today is getting the torque converter in the Jeep. It's having a major stalling issue. I've replaced every sensor on the motor, thinking it was sensor related. I've changed some gaskets, nothing's helped. Finally, I had it checked, and the dealership said it's the converter going out. So I went and picked up a converter. It's a used one. It's not guaranteed that it's going to work, but we're going to give it hell. I didn't pay anything for it, and that's what this Jeep's all about, is building it on a budget. So we're going to get this in. Hopefully this fixes the problem, because it's stalling so much. It's stalling every time I come to a stop, reverse, drive, everything. So can't drive it. I cannot drive it the way it is, especially in the woods. So we're gonna go ahead and get this thing apart. I have some help on this video, and so should be able to get it out pretty quick. So let's get to it. All right, so we started by getting the drive shaft out. The bolts were rotted, so we ended up using a plasma cutter without using the ground, and we got it out. I just used it to heat it up like a torch, but it's a little bit easier. Got the bolts out, started getting the transfer case out. Super easy stuff on this thing. Jeremiah was getting the training lines out, and I was getting all the linkages and plugs. All right, so we got the transfer case out. We got some help today. Kyle and Jeremiah to the rescue. We have the training lines out, working on the torque converter bolts. If Kyle finds the 14 wrench that he lost. Did he find it?
Yes, I did.
Where was it?
Not in the place in the drawer, just thrown in there.
So you put it in the wrong spot.
I don't think I put it in there.
Oh, let's blame somebody else.
I mean, it could have been me. I'll take responsibility.
We had to blow torch the bolts out of the drive shafts, which means I have to replace a U-joint because it fell on the ground. So.
But that's Kyle's fault too, probably.
This is probably Kyle's fault. Probably just as much Kyle's fault as it is Obama's.
Don't link me in with that guy. I'm not.
So all we got now, after he gets all these bell housing or torque converter bolts out, a couple bell housing bolts. The most difficult one is going to be the one that's above the starter, because Dodge is a shitty person for that design. And once it's out, we're gonna swap it out and change the converter. Oh. Jeremiah's not saying anything. All right, so we got the rest of the torque converter bolts out. And then after we did that, we started taking the bell housing bolts out, which honestly, they were all super easy, except the one above the starter, because you gotta get the starter out, and then you can barely get a socket in there. Giant pain in the ass, but it got it out. All right, so public service announcement: disconnect the battery before you take the starter out. All right, so we got the converter or the transmission out. We're getting the converter out, and it just so happens with 3 people, it takes an hour, apparently. Pull this out. It's still warm. You gotta cut the weld off.
Alright. Well, that was really cool. Seeing the transmission come out. I hurt my foot trying to save your phone, so I'm going to use out the headphone.
All right. That's
Fun.
fun. Thank you. I appreciate the help.
I'll see you next time.
See ya. All right, that should be a little way. All right, so we got the converter in. Super simple. You just gotta jiggle it in until it gets into the final spots. This is a used converter. I'm aware it's not recommended, but we're doing it anyway. And then, yeah, next step is to put it all back together. All right, so I broke a sensor, so I had to fix that. So we got that on and then got the transmission in like that. Super easy, took 5 seconds. And then got the bell housing bolts in, got the training lines back on, transfer case, which is heavy, by the way. Dodge stuff is always heavy. Got the linkages all back together, got the cross member in with the drop spacers because I dropped it down, and then the new brackets and bolts from Advanced Auto Parts and Battery. That's a Ghost, by the way. Just kidding, it's a vape pen from somebody hanging out, but it could be a Ghost. And then we had to clean all the threads out because the drive shaft hasn't been in this thing since 2003. Got that in, and then yeah, just about buttoned everything up. All right, so we got the transmission back in. I've done some test driving. I think it's good. It had a very bad idle issue, and I think it's pretty much solved. I didn't have any issues with it the first time I drove it, so I'm gonna have to say this was a win. Front drive shaft is in and is working. I do think I hear some axle noise coming from this side now that I got the drive shaft in it. So we might have to deal with that, but we will cross that when we do. So on to the next one. It made it a lot better, but honestly, it still likes to stall out coming into a reverse. So I'll end up just putting a whole new tranny in it at some point here. But it was worth a try, and honestly, it only took me a couple hours, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But I could drive it now. Before, I actually couldn't drive it, so it is a lot better. On the next episode, we're going to be putting our fancy new light bar on, and a couple other little upgrades too. And that was a Ghost. See you on the next one.